Okay, so this is the last little bit of the chapter. So after this lesson, we move on to chapter 2, which is biomechanics. So we're going to look at the effects of exercise. Don't worry if you can't find it. Yeah, it's not the end of the world. So we're going to look at immediate effects, short-term effects, and long-term effects. There's not actually much content today, so the actual learning that you need to remember isn't loads, but it's implement it into a 9-mark question. It's going to be a lot of writing and written work today. So we look at the immediate effects. That happens as soon as you start exercising. So because we're half asleep, can everyone stand up behind your chair? Just for you, Daniel, to wake you up. Wake up as well.
Yeah.
Right, can you do me 15 star jumps?
Oh God, that's how I did my cruciate ligaments. I think I passed
15
on that.
jumps. Daniel, you do trampoline and your stunt jumps should look better than that.
Yeah, come on, Dan. Put an effort in.
Tell me one thing that's happened to you.
I feel a bit more awake.
Okay. Try and think about science stuff. So think of something that's actually changed. Tell me one thing that's happened to you.
Heart rate's gone up.
Okay, heart rate's gone up, Daniel.
I just feel tired.
So heart rate has definitely changed. Anything to do with your breathing?
Breathing will speed up. Might start to feel warmer.
Good temperature. So that's what we're thinking about. You can relax now. So when we're talking about immediate effects, it's the stuff that start happening straight away while we're exercising. Short-term effects are the stuff that happen almost immediately after, or even maybe during, but at the end of the exercise. And long-term effect is what happens as a result of training. So it's not after one training session, it'll be after 6 weeks of training sessions 3 times a week and actually training. So if you're doing a sport, if you're playing football 3 times a week, you should get these long-term effects. If you're doing trampolining once or twice a week, you'll get these long-term effects. When we're talking about long-term though, these take a long time to build up, but they're really quick to lose them. So you might train for 2 years consistently and you get some great benefits, then you stop for 3 months. And all of a sudden you've lost all of those benefits that you've done over 2 years. So it takes a long time to build, but it's really quick to lose. Right, you've just done a tiny bit, but I want you to think of how many you can think of now. So I think you thought of 3 for when you said temperature, you said heart rate, and you said something to do with your breathing. I've got 7 on there. I want you to take a minute. Can you think of all 7 that happened during exercise? You can jot it down or you can just think of it in your head. It's up to you.
Didn't you read paper, love?
You are brain dead, aren't you?
So there's 7 that I've got on there. A lot you might be able to feel, some you'll know, but you can't necessarily feel it. So it might be stuff that we've learned, but you can't feel that change. You just know something's happened in your body while you're exercising. We would have gone over some last lesson when we were looking at the respiratory system. You've got 6.
I don't know if they're all right though.
I said that.
It
You're
might
awake
be
this morning.
nothing to do with it.
Be confident. Be confident. Read out which ones you've got, Senna.
Heart rate,
What about heart rate?
like it'll speed up.
Okay, increased heart rate.
Lactic acid, that's a bit more long time.
Be long term or short term or.
Temperature,
What about temperature?
hotter.
Good. Use the word increase or decrease because it just sounds more scientific.
Breathing would speed up.
Go on, what word do you need to use?
Increase.
Good, increased breathing rate.
Blood might be transported to different parts of the body, like depends what is needed.
Do you remember what we called that? Redistribution of blood.
Yeah.
That's really good. Well done for remembering that one.
Gas exchange can obviously happen.
What would happen to the rate of gaseous exchange?
So it go up.
Yeah, it would go up because there's more oxygen coming in because our breathing rates increase, so gas exchange will go up. Well done. Anyone got anything different to those ones?
Perspiration.
Good, sweating. Well done. Let's have a look and see if I've got any different ones. So increased heart rate, good. Sweating and vasodilation, we just spoke about that. Increased breathing rate we spoke about, and blood distribution. Increased tidal volume, what does tidal volume mean again?
Feel the air coming in.
Per breath, yeah, perfect. The air that we inhale and exhale per breath. And remember we spoke about that last week, that increases, but vital capacity doesn't. Yeah, you're right. The tidal volume gets bigger, but vital capacity is the maximum we breathe in and out when it's forced, so that doesn't get bigger. So we've got increased tidal volume, the amount we breathe in per breath. Increased breathing rate, the amount of breaths we take per minute. So these two are going to make sure we've got more oxygen coming in. Blood distribution's changed, sweat and vasodilation. Increased cardiac output. What is cardiac output again?
Blood coming out of the heart.
Per,
Heartbeat.
not per beat, per minute, and this one's per beat. So cardiac output is per minute, and stroke volume is per beat. How can we link these two together? What was the formula? Something times something equals something. This is the blood per beat, and this is the blood per minute. These two have got to be linked, haven't they?
You do the per beat times how many beats per minute.
Yeah, perfect. Equals cardiac output. So stroke volume times by heart rate equals cardiac output. And last one, increased heart rate, which we spoke about. So these are the 7 immediate effects. What I want you to do now is just list these on your piece of paper, and I want you to think about how do these things support activity? So why do they happen? So can you try and get an evaluative sentence telling about the impact? So increased heart rate, that happens. Why? Why does that make you better at exercise? Stroke volume happens. Why does that happen? How does that make you better when you're performing? Does that make sense what I'm asking you to do?
Yeah.
So what impact does each one of these have on performance? So this is what we're going to look at a lot today, the word impact. So our body's very clever, it adapts constantly, but it's adapting to have an impact. So what impact does each of these individual things? So I would say maybe for increased heart, you could almost link all of these together maybe. There'd be certain ones that will link quite well. So if I did an example for you, so if I write increased breathing rate is the number of breaths I take. This is going to have a positive impact on performance because I'll take in more oxygen, allowing me to create more energy for performance. Does that make sense? So if you look at each one individually, what impact will it have on activity? Why will you be better at performing? So just have a look at the impact and the why.
Dan, move your... Dan,
just one sentence on each. And these are the key words we're looking at today, impact and why. So every time we talk about something, you're going to keep on talking about it until there's no more whys. So if you've made a statement, it allows the body to have more oxygen. Why? I want you to keep on asking yourself why until you've got to the point that that's all of your whys and performance has improved. Keep asking yourself why until it's done and you've got to the point that it's because it improves performance. Some of them you might also, if you've really thought about it, not only talk about oxygen for energy, but also to remove or to prevent the build-up of lactic acid. That would be a really good answer. So remember, we always want oxygen for two things: to create energy and to stop the build-up of lactic acid, to stop us getting so tired. Some of them you might also refer to carbon dioxide as well, not only transporting oxygen, but to... Although actually, let's ignore that because we're talking about having spot activity and carbon dioxide isn't relevant to that point. Okay, I'm going to give you a few more minutes. Don't worry if you don't finish all of them because we'll talk about them all together. But if you've done a few, then you've started to think that way and then it will be just the same for each different point. Okay, finish the one you're on and then we'll come together and we'll talk about it opposed to writing it off. Okay, did anyone do increased heart rate? Did we all start from the top? Senna, did you do increased heart rate?
I think I missed that one actually. I don't know why.
Did you, or did you just not want to share it?
No, I missed it.
Daniel, tell me about increased heart rate. So that, why does that happen and how does that support activity?
Your heart rate increases because your muscles need more blood so that they can get the oxygen to use as energy.
Perfect. So increased heart rate occurs because our muscles need more oxygen and more blood to create energy. So we increase heart rate to increase the supply of oxygen. Well done. Send an increased stroke volume. If you haven't done it, don't worry, give it a go. So increased stroke volume is increased amount of blood per beat.
So,
What does that mean? What happens to blood supply because of this?
there's more, it's like, yeah, there's more blood.
Yeah, it's a faster supply of blood, isn't it? Because more blood is being ejected per beat. So this means there's a faster supply of blood. So then, how's that going to support activity?
It's going to give more oxygen. So, like, yeah, have more oxygen in certain parts of the body. What need more oxygen?
Good, and how's that going to make you better at activity?
So you have more energy.
Yeah, we can create more energy through what type of respiration? Aerobic or anaerobic? Anyone can answer that.
Aerobic.
Aerobic, yeah, anaerobic is without. Okay, increased cardiac output. Do you want to have a go at this one, Sarah? So increased amount of blood is kind of these two combined, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we've got more blood per minute.
That means that it will,
So if there's more blood coming out of the heart per minute, what happens to the blood supply to the working muscles? They're getting more or less blood to the muscles. Yeah, so how will that make them better at sport?
that will give me
And they're going to use the oxygen for aerobic. Yeah, aerobic activity and aerobic respiration. So it means that we can create more energy from it. On these three, we spoke a lot then about transporting oxygen for aerobic respiration and create energy. What did we not talk about? Why we also need oxygen? What else is it going to do at the muscle? I've just done 100 squats and my legs are starting to ache. Why are they starting to ache? Yeah, the lactic acid is building up in my legs. So what's the oxygen going to help me do?
break the lactic acid down.
Yeah, it's going to break it back down and create the water and carbon dioxide that are easy to transport and get rid of. So remember, we can also talk about lactate. Jemima, sweating and vasodilation. Don't worry if you haven't done it because you can talk about that anyway. How does that help you during exercise?
I may be wrong, but is the sweating to do with the lactic acid breakdown?
Not necessarily. We're talking about in terms of, we're talking about vasodilation, we're talking about it for something else. Why do blood vessels vasodilate? What does that mean? Dilate means bigger, constrict gets smaller. What does
it
that
can supply more blood to the muscles.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons. So that's definitely when we're going to talk about this in a minute. What's the other reason? If I get told to stand up, do 20 star jumps, why all of a sudden does your skin look red? Something to
There's more
this.
blood closer to the skin.
Good, and why do we want it close to the skin?
So it's more air gets you, more airflow.
Not necessarily airflow. If your skin's red because the blood's close to the skin, what's it feel like to touch?
Hot.
Hot, because we want to get rid of heat, because when we're exercising we don't want to overheat, because if we overheat it's going to have a detrimental effect to exercise. We're going to perform not so well if we overheat. So we need to get rid of heat, so we're going to do it these two ways. So vasodilation means the blood vessels getting close to the skin. Our face or skin, wherever it is, tends to become red and we lose heat through radiation. The way that we lose heat when sweating is not the actual sweat, that doesn't enable us to lose heat, it's the evaporation of water of our skin that cools us down. So when we sweat, we're not just, well, sometimes we are quite wet, aren't we? But generally it will then evaporate, and it's that evaporation that enables us to lose heat. So this one, in terms of the impact, is these two prevent us from overheating. They enable our body to control our body temperature, and the overheating has a negative effect on performance, so it prevents the body overheating. Back to Daniel, increased tidal volume. So tidal volume is the amount of air that we inhale and exhale per breath. How will that improve activity?
Because you're getting more air in, that can increase the heart rate, which allows for more blood to get to the muscles. More
Ignore
oxygen.
blood for the moment. Think about the first bit of just the air. Stick to that bit. If you're having more air coming in per breath, what are you getting more of first?
Oxygen.
And then go on to the blood about how we transport it then.
It goes into lungs and then it goes through the heart. You pump around the body.
Perfect. And then it results in,
More energy.
so they're all going to lead to the same thing, aren't they? Because the immediate effects of exercise is our body needs more oxygen, or our body needs more energy. So we're going to get more oxygen in per breath, which means more oxygen in the blood supply, which means more oxygen in the muscles. Increased breathing rate. We're going to say exactly the same thing, really, aren't we, as this one? Increased breathing rate means we're getting more oxygen in per minute, as well as more per breath. Therefore, we've got more oxygen in our blood supply to transport to our muscles. Last one, blood distribution. That's a slightly different one to these. How's this going to help?
Means that less blood is going to your digestive system and stuff like that,
Mhm.
instead going to muscles.
Good. And how's that going to make you better activity?
It's going to mean that the things that you're using have more energy.
Yeah.
So things you're not using.
Perfect. Again, we're prioritising what we do need oxygen for and increase the oxygen at working muscles. So again, we can create more energy, have less build-up of lactic acid and perform better. So all of these things allow us to work harder because we're creating more energy, longer because we prevent the build-up of lactic acid, so therefore perform better overall. So these are our immediate things. One thing that we haven't spoke about is our blood pressure. What is blood pressure? Do you remember what the definition of blood pressure is? Because that helps you think about what will happen to it. So it's something to do with the blood vessel, isn't it? So blood pressure is the amount of pressure the blood puts on the blood vessel walls. So imagine if there's lots of blood, we're all squeezed in, so we're pushing on those walls. So that's why arteries have high blood pressure. If there's not so much blood, or if it's going through a slower rate, like in the veins when it's travelling back to the heart, there'll be less blood pressure. So now think about that. We spoke about heart rate, we spoke about cardiac output, we spoke about stroke volume. What happens to blood pressure during exercise?
Increases.
Yeah, it increases because we've got more blood going out per beat, so therefore there's more pressure. So if we did your blood pressure during exercise or straight after, it's always going to be higher. Okay, we've just done this, so explain the three immediate effects, state what it is, and then explain why. So this is exactly what we've just done, and this is what you're going to use when we start thinking about those long answer questions. Okay, the short-term effects. You've already come out of one. What was your one?
Lactic acid.
Lactic acid. So there'd be a build-up of lactic acid. What other things do we experience as a short-term effect? So maybe...
Heavy breathing.
Good. What was that called? Begins at E. Do you remember that?
No.
Epoch. Do you remember that? Did I don't know if I called it that term or not now. So these are our... I'm pretty sure it's only 4. These are our 4 short-term effects. They're ones that will happen immediately after, or kind of a day, 2 days after. So we've got muscle fatigue, which happens because of the build-up of lactic acid. So we don't necessarily talk about a build-up of lactic acid. It comes under muscle fatigue because that's the symptom of the build-up of lactic acid. So our muscles tire straight after or during exercise because of that build-up. We might get cramp. And you see that a lot you'll see it in every sport, but especially if you're watching football in the extra time, when they've played 90 minutes already, and their bodies are used to that 90 minutes, aren't they? So they can cope with the 90 minutes because that's what they do week in, week out as a football player. But when they do that extra half an hour of extra time, you'll see a lot start going down with cramp at the end because that build-up is just too much and it's not what their bodies are necessarily used to. So we get cramp, and that's caused by severe muscle fatigue. It usually hits when a performer's tired, but I haven't got that there. We've got DOMS. Do you know what? I've got it here. Delayed onset of muscle soreness. So your muscles, sometimes you've done a really hard workout, but your muscles feel fine. You don't realise they're going to ache. You wake up the next day and they're still okay. But it's the second day, then all of a sudden you get that really bad ache. So it's the delayed onset. Have you ever had that? Where you think, oh, actually, that was all right. I didn't work as hard as I thought I could. And you wake up the next day and all of a sudden it's like, oh, maybe I did work hard. And your muscles have just got that delay. So it normally happens about 24 hours or 36 hours after. So it's not immediate, it's a little bit after. And the reason it happens is because microscopic muscle tears. So we're going to look at this with the long-term effect. But your muscle, do you remember when you had that picture? Your muscle's not just one muscle, it's got loads of fibres in it. So it's got thousands of fibres in there. The reason or how your muscles get stronger is they experience micro tears. So they're not ripped completely, but they've got these micro tears. And so when we work them really hard, we overwork them and we put stress on those muscle fibres so that they have those little micro tears. But when they heal bigger, so they increase in size, which we see our muscles getting bigger in size, and stronger. So the only way that we actually experience benefits to the muscles are by getting these microscopic muscle tears. So when we tear them, they can grow back bigger and stronger.
And is that when they take these muscle powders and things like that, it's helping to put extra protein into those tear spots?
They're to recover, so
Yeah.
nothing to do with the tear to begin with, that's the training, but to help you recover and build quicker and recover quicker. Because the protein, so when we look at diet, which is in paper 2, that's why some people have different diets. So we need a high protein diet if we're going to do lots of weightlifting and anything that's going to cause lots of tears, because it's the protein that repairs them. And then last one, we've already spoke about this last lesson. Do you remember the oxygen debt? So even after we finish exercise, we've got a debt of oxygen because we've been using it during exercise, and we need to replace it and to break down that lactic acid. So a short-term effect is that we're still bringing in extra oxygen, because that was part of the exercise where we needed that oxygen, but it wasn't available. We didn't have quite enough, which is why we did some anaerobic respiration. But because we did anaerobic respiration, we've built lactic acid, so we need to replace that oxygen, bring it back in, and get rid of the lactic acid that's at the muscles. So after exercise, we're going to get muscle fatigue, cramp as a result of this muscle fatigue, DOMS, and oxygen debt. None of these are particularly positive, aren't they? So the immediate ones, all positive, it helps us. Our short-term effects are just a result of working hard. They're not going to help us exercise. It's just when we have worked hard, what happens to our body. This is our rest and recovery period. This is why we need to, when we plan exercise sessions, plan in for rest and recovery. Because if we continue to experience these without letting our body recover, we're actually going to decrease in strength rather than increase, because we need to allow our body to improve these microscopic muscle tears. Right, so our last one are long-term effects. These are the ones that we go into lots of detail on. So these are ones that have a consistent training. So in this course, you're going to do a piece of coursework. We're not going to start it just yet, and it's called our PEP. So in some of the exam questions, they'll refer to the PEP. So it's a personal exercise program. Do you remember I spoke about you're going to write a 6-week program? This is what I want you to experience in that 6-week program. So when you plan your own 6-week program, it's going to be about the sport you do. So Daniel does trampolining. We're not going to look so much about aerobic, because it's not so aerobic, it's all about power. So Daniel's program for trampolining would be much more on the muscular system, because we want to improve this so we can jump higher, we can create more power. But with Daniel playing football, it might be more on the respiratory system. He's really good for the first half, second half he gets too tired, so he needs to get in more oxygen. So it'll depend on what the question's based on to which one you're going to look at most. But for our long-term effects, I've put it into the 4 systems that we've looked at. So we've got the skeletal system, which is increased bone density. The muscular system, which is the increased strength of the connective tissues. Connective tissues referring to the ligaments and tendons, so it attaches the muscles to bone, bone to bone. Muscle hypertrophy. Has anyone heard of the word hypertrophy before? No? Hypertrophy just means bigger and stronger. So you know when you've been training for 6 weeks and all of a sudden your biceps look much bigger, that muscle has gone through hypertrophy. So it's not only bigger to look at, but it's stronger and can work harder. Then the respiratory system, we've got increased lung capacity. What does capacity mean?
Size.
Yeah, so it can take more in. Increased number of alveoli. Does anyone remember what the alveoli do?
The gas exchange.
Yeah, perfect. So if we've got more, we can increase the gases exchange. And increased strength of the diaphragm intercostal muscles. Remember, the diaphragm comes down and straight intercostal muscles move the ribs up and out. So if these are stronger, it's going to help with that lung capacity. They can pull down quicker and they can pull down stronger, which means the diaphragm maybe might have been a tiny bit creased before, can now get completely flat. It's much stronger. And we've got the cardiovascular system. So this is going to be a decreased resting heart rate. So heart rate rest what your heart rate is now, so it will stay lower. Our faster recovery rate. When we're talking about recovery rate, I'd be talking about, so say I get you to do 60 minutes of exercise now, 60 minutes or 60 seconds, sorry, and we did your resting heart rate first. If your resting heart rate was 60 beats per minute, and then after exercise it was 120 beats per minute, your recovery rate would be how long it takes you to get back to 60. So you do your heart rate a minute after, a minute after, a minute after until it's back down to 60. So that would be your recovery rate. So if you work out or if you train for a long period of time, you can recover much quicker. Increase stroke volume, increase cardiac output, cardiac hypertrophy, so your heart is bigger and stronger, increase capillarization, so more capillaries, increase red blood cells, and decrease resting blood pressure. So we're going to go through these in the next few slides in more details. But there's a lot of these, and this will come up quite a lot in this course in terms of, it's a high chance that this could come up in a 9-mark question, because it's quite a lot to write about, so it enables you to really evaluate. But you'll use this a lot in your coursework. So this lesson today is massive for your coursework. So we'll need to learn what training methods you can use, but this will be your evaluation. This is what you want to achieve. So if we look at the skeletal system first, so we've said increased bone density. This is going to happen when you're doing weight bearing exercise. So it's not really going to happen if you're going to do really light activities. It needs to be weight bearing and put some strain on your body for you to increase your bone density. So if we look at weight training, running, or any team sports really, netball, basketball, anything where you're jumping, trampolining, there's a lot of weight bearing going on those bones. And when we do those, you put those bones under stress. For our body to cope with that and to adapt with that stress, we produce more cells that produce more bone. So when we look at density of a bone, if you have a low density, it's going to have lots of like holes inside the bone. It's not complete dense, it's not hard all inside. And one of the conditions, osteoporosis, have you heard of this? A lot of old people, or not a lot of old people, but you're more likely to get it with age, and if you have osteoporosis, your bones are less dense and they can break easier. Have you got osteoporosis now?
You mentioned the word.
So osteoporosis, your bones are less dense, they can break a lot more easily. So if we're doing weight bearing activities, we can prevent this because we're producing more bone cells and creating new bone. So our bones are stronger and they can cope with the strain of exercise. So everything that we're going to talk about in here is just allowing our body to cope with that strain of exercise and to be better at it. For our muscular system, we've got increased strength of connective tissues. Kind of does what it says. Our ligaments are stronger, so it holds the joint in place. You're less likely to have that dislocation, or the joint is just more stable. Again, with the tendons holding the muscles to the bone, it's just stronger. You're less likely to have an injury to those connective tissues. And then we've got muscular hypertrophy. So this again is only going to happen at high intensity. You're not really going to get muscular hypertrophy by doing an hour walk every day, because an hour walk isn't going to cause tears at those muscles. You need to do it at high intensity to create these micro tears. If we don't have these tears, we don't get muscular hypertrophy. So when we work at a high intensity, we get the micro tears at the fibres, and these repair bigger and stronger. So you'll see visually that the muscle is just bigger, But the function of that is it's stronger, it can create more power, it can create more strength, you can work harder for longer. So all of these things are just going to make you stronger for it. So it'd be really easy to see if I just got you to do a bicep curl every day. So if I gave you heavy weight, don't care about anything else in your body, but a bicep curl, you're going to do 20 bicep curls a day. You'll start to see over a period of time that the bicep will go through that hypertrophy and it'll be bigger. And you'll have to increase your strength, your weight, because it will be stronger as well. For the respiratory system, it's going to be all about the lungs and the oxygen. So we've got increased lung capacity, therefore your lungs have an increased volume, increased vital capacity, therefore they're more efficient at delivering oxygen. So this is going to make us a lot more efficient. If we've got increased number of alveoli within the lungs, therefore there's more places for gases exchange to take place. Therefore this process of gases exchange is more efficient. Increased strength of the diaphragm and intercostal muscles support breathing during exercise and allow for the increased breathing rate and deeper breaths. So they're strong enough to allow for us to continue to breathe quicker because they've got to work harder, so we need them to be stronger. And they allow us to have a deeper breath, therefore getting more oxygen or more air per breath. So all of these three will increase the efficiency of getting oxygen to the muscles or getting oxygen into the body. If we've got increased lung capacity, we can take in more per breath, and that's supported by the increased strength of the respiratory muscles because that allows for the increased capacity. And if we've got increased alveoli increases the efficiency of the exchange, so we can swap the oxygen to carbon dioxide much quicker, therefore get the oxygen to the muscles much quicker. Sure. Okay, so I've put the cardiovascular system all together because they're so interlinked with the stroke volume, cardiac output, cardiac hypertrophy. So the heart is a muscle, we know this, don't we? Because we've got the 4 types of muscle, with the cardiac being a type of muscle. So because it's a muscle, it's going to respond the same way to exercise as any other muscle in our body. If our legs get bigger and stronger from doing exercise, so does our heart. So our heart therefore responds in the same way. It gets bigger and stronger, which is called cardiac hypertrophy, and therefore has increased volume because the heart's bigger, so it can hold more blood, so it's got increased volume, and it can push blood out of the heart with an increased force. Just think about that for a second. That's because the walls of the heart are stronger, therefore, is it diastole or systole when it contracts? Yeah, because remember diastole, it relaxes. The systole can contract with more force, therefore it can push the blood out with more force. The increased volume means that the heart now has increased stroke volume and cardiac output. If the heart's bigger, it can pump out more per beat, therefore it's going to have increased cardiac output as well. If the heart can pump more blood out per beat at rest, it will not need to pump so often. So when we're talking about rest, so you guys sitting down here now, your body doesn't need a lot of oxygen. It needs a certain amount to do all the bodily functions, but it only needs that certain amount. Getting extra oxygen does not have any benefit. We don't need it. So based on how much oxygen your body needs will dictate your resting heart rate. So if you need, and this number is nowhere near correct and it's just a number, but if we need 500 millilitres per minute, and our stroke volume is 50 millilitres, what will our resting heart rate be? So if we need 500 millilitres per minute to just function, and our stroke volume is 50 millilitres, what will our resting heart rate be? Which again is ridiculous, but what would your resting heart rate be on there? 50 times by what? It's 500. 10, yeah. So these numbers are nowhere near right, they're just random numbers. But if you can see it like that, if your stroke volume increases, it goes to 60, obviously this number will decrease. So the reason your resting heart rate decreases with exercise is because of your stroke volume. Because at rest, you only need a certain amount. And if we can pump out more blood per beat, the heart doesn't need to work so hard. So our heart can not rest, but it won't have to work so hard, it won't have to pump so often, but because we can meet those requirements with less beats. So everything we're looking at is efficiency. So by increasing the stroke volume, our heart's more efficient, so it doesn't have to work so hard just at rest. Therefore, that the difference between rest, if your heart rate only is 60 at rest, it can go all the way up to 120. That gives you a much bigger scope to improve during exercise. If you're quite unfit and your heart rate's already 100 and it can only go up 20 beats per minute, say, it's not going to have a massive impact on your activity. You're not going to experience much more oxygen at the muscles to at rest. So we've got the fact that our resting heart rate decreases. And lastly, the heart is able to get back to the resting heart rate much quicker as a result of training. And that's what we talked about before, didn't we? That it's got a faster recovery rate, so the heart rate getting back quicker. So overall, using all of these things, our heart is a much more efficient muscle as a result of long-term activity. So it's stronger, it's bigger, it can pump more per beat, therefore we pump more per minute. It pumps less often during rest, and it can return to its resting heart rate much quicker as a result of exercise. The blood's also adapted, so we've got the machine as such, the heart that transports the blood, but the blood itself also adapts, and the blood vessels. So we're going to experience increased capillarization. So we're going to have capillarization at the alveoli in the lungs and at the muscles, because these are the two places where we've got that gases exchange taking place. So at the alveoli in the lungs, if we've got more capillaries around all the alveoli, again, there's more places for gases exchange between the alveoli and the capillaries. So if we've got more, that we can increase the rate of gases exchange and get that to happen much more efficiently. And if we've got more at the muscles, again, we can get that rate of gas exchange at the muscle increase to get more oxygen there quicker as well. And we're also going to increase the number of red blood cells. Therefore, red blood cells, what do they carry? Oxygen. Therefore, again, we're getting more oxygen to the muscles. So not only can we carry more oxygen inside the blood, therefore getting more oxygen to the muscles, when it gets to the muscles, we can swap it with carbon dioxide much quicker and more efficiently, so therefore we can use the oxygen quicker to create energy in aerobic respiration. Lastly, regular exercise makes the walls of the veins and arteries more elastic, so they're more stretchy, which results in reduced blood pressure. If we're exercising and we've got that increased blood pressure, we don't want our blood pressure to go too high, so as a result of long-term exercise, our body adapts again and becomes more elastic, so our blood pressure doesn't go too hard. This because the heart is stronger. Sorry, I was just making sure if it makes sense. This is because the heart is stronger, it doesn't have to work so hard at rest, and the blood is not pumped out with such force, also reducing blood pressure. So at rest, our resting blood pressure will decrease because we're not having to work so hard to get that amount of blood that we need around the body at rest. So when we're resting, as our resting heart rate decreases, we're not having to pump so much blood. So therefore, our blood pressure at rest will decrease. So a long-term adaptation is our blood pressure decreases, but an immediate effect is our blood pressure will increase. So you've got your resting heart blood pressure. An unfit person will have a higher blood pressure than a fit person. But both of those people, both of their blood pressure will increase when they're exercising just because of the increase of blood coming around the body. Okay, these are all of the adaptations we're going to look at today. So there's no more content that we need to remember, and we can go back to the slides and look at them when we're using the content. But I want us now to just try and use this content. So first we're just going to look at some short answer questions, and then we're going to do some long answer questions. So, number of marks means the number of points, and sometimes we also use it for number of minutes. So a 2 mark, we generally say 1 mark per minute, but if they're much shorter, this is where you want to gain time in your exams, because although your 9 markers are only 9 marks, it's going to take you a lot longer than 9 minutes, because we're looking at structure, how you write it, we're looking at evaluation. So maximum this will take you is 2 minutes, but really you want to get it done in 1 minute to save time. So Ray is a long distance cyclist. As part of her personal exercise programme, remember that's the piece of coursework that you'd write, so your 6-week training programme, Ray carries out aerobic training regularly. State 2 long-term effects of aerobic training on the cardiorespiratory system. So let's not write this, we can talk these through. So who can give me one long-term effect of aerobic training on the cardiorespiratory system. And it's asking you to state, so we're not explaining, we're just stating, so we won't waste time going into further detail. I just want one of those long-term effects. So cardiorespiratory, remember that's the heart and the lungs.
Increased lung capacity.
Good, increased lung capacity would be one. Another one? Any of them, all those slides that we've just gone through, tell me any. Any long-term effect of training?
Increased tidal volume.
Increased tidal volume. Let's go for a few more. What else happens? Just gone through loads on the heart. What's happened to the heart?
Increases.
During exercise, careful on the long term. So what's so long term? Which is called cardiac.
Output.
Not quite. There's a H. Same happens to your muscles. They get bigger and stronger. Hypertrophy. We can talk about hypertrophy. We can talk about straight volume. We can talk about cardiac output. You can talk about lung capacity. You can talk about the strength of the respiratory muscles. You could talk about increased red blood cells, the changes to the blood vessels, decreased resting heart rate. So any of these that we could talk about in this question. Now we're explaining them. So explain two long-term effects we stated in A would be an advantage to long distance. So this is where we're looking at the impact. So why does it happen? Explain how it's going to help. So we've got about 20 that we could talk about. So you're going to choose one each, so we can do 4 points. So Senan, choose any long-term effect for me that you'd like to talk about.
Blood cell production, more blood cells are produced.
So more red blood cells. Okay, so our point here would be increased number of red blood cells. Explain to me how that's going to help him in long distance cycling. When we think about long distance, are we thinking about aerobic or anaerobic?
Anaerobic.
So without oxygen,
No, but
aerobic. So how's that going to help him in aerobic respiration if he's got more red blood cells?
You'll have more energy and it'll break down the lactic acids.
Good. You're completely right, but you've missed that easy point. Increase what?
Increase
What do red blood cells do? They transport.
oxygen.
Good. So you might miss the mark if you don't actually refer to oxygen, because yes, they will produce more energy.
Yeah.
And they will break down lactic acid, but it's that oxygen that's the important bit. Good, so the explanation would be increased oxygen to the muscles, therefore more energy and less lactic acid. Then you'll choose a different long-term effect.
Lung capacity.
Good, perfect. And just explain how that's going to help him.
Means that you can take in more air with a single breath, allowing for more oxygenated blood to be pumped around the body and the muscles. Therefore, they have more energy.
Perfect. Jemima, different one?
Increased cardiac output.
Cardiac output. Okay, yeah, go for it. So explain it. Why is that helpful? Doesn't happen for the sake of it. Why does it happen?
Because it can increase energy, which
Good. Same as Senan. What have you missed?
oxygen.
Good.
It increases oxygen.
Which gives you more energy, which you need for aerobic exercise.
Yeah, increase cardiac output. So sometimes just go back a step and start really simple, because you need to explain that you even understand cardiac output. So it means that there's more blood going around the body per minute, therefore more oxygen will be delivered to the muscles to create energy. Sarah, choose the last one that you like. Not necessarily as a long term. What about increased alveoli?
Okay.
How will that help the long distance cyclist? If they've got more alveoli in the lungs.
It will.
What happens to alveoli? What two things swap at the alveoli in the lungs?
And
Carbon.
dioxide.
Good, so it's where gases exchange happens, isn't it? So if there's more alveoli in the lungs, gases exchange can happen quicker. Why will that make the cyclist better?
Because more oxygen will come into the body.
Yeah, perfect. There's more oxygen available for aerobic respiration, so we can create more energy. We don't need to look at the mark scheme for that one. I'm just going to do that one.
Would high altitude, if you're thinking just in terms of remembering for the exam, sort of long-term cycling, like high altitude, like Tour de France, you'd be definitely looking at talking about, you know, they may even name it specifically, but you'd be looking at the gaseous exchange and the efficiency.
Yeah, altitude comes into a separate, there is a small topic on altitude, and they'll go, it's not loads, but looking at how your body adapts when you train at high altitude. But that will always, you'd never talk about that in a normal question, only if it's spoke about, because it's irrelevant to the normal training. It's only if you've trained at high altitude. It's quite a big bit in AQA. I haven't actually checked how big it is in EdXL. But in AQA, they've used it quite a lot into long answer questions. So this is our 9 marker. So the 9 markers, you'll get 2 in exam. And 9 markers doesn't mean 9 points. You've got to use the structure for 9 markers. So we'll get used to this, and we're going to look at PPE paragraphs. You might have done PPE paragraphs anyway. So point, explain, evaluate in every single paragraph. How it's structured, and this is almost irrelevant to you, but just so you understand it, is you get 3 marks for AO1, 3 marks for AO2, and 3 marks for AO3. And all this means is, this is identifying, so it's your knowledge, definitions, stating anything that shows your knowledge. AO2 is application, so being able to apply it to the netball player or whatever the context is of the question. And AO3 is your evaluation. So you'll get 3 marks for each. If you've got knowledge in there, but you can't apply it and you can't evaluate it, your maximum marks you can get is 3. So we need to make sure the structure of our paragraphs is perfect, and we keep going over those structures to enable you to access all 9 marks. So how we're going to structure every single paragraph is our first is our point. So always going to come out of a point, some sort of knowledge or identification of what's in the question. Secondly, you're going to apply it to the sport or the situation they've given you. And lastly, you're going to evaluate it. We're not going to put 2 points in one paragraph because we're looking to do 3 separate paragraphs. So we're going to have 1 paragraph section like this, the next paragraph, the next paragraph. In today's lesson, we're going to start writing some today, but we're going to start with a plan, and we're going to plan it and bullet point it like this before we put it into the paragraph. So if we look at the question, we've got evaluate how long-term adaptations to the body systems can improve the performance of a netball player. What 1 point could we use? What could be, what's it even asking us? What does it want us to do? Evaluate how long-term adaptations to the body systems can improve the performance of a netball player. Give me 1 thing that we could discuss. What could be the topic of 1 paragraph? It's almost what you've just done a minute ago. Where do you think you'd get knowledge into that question? What would be your knowledge?
Bone density, maybe?
Yeah, anything that is talking about a long-term adaptation. So the long-term adaptation in any one of those that you've spoken about previously would be your point. Your application would be therefore telling me how is that going to help a netball player. An evaluation is then what impact it's going to have, why is that going to help, how is that going to make them a better netball player. So if we look at a first paragraph that I've done, then we're going to try and do it separately. So to begin with, I'm going to always use these 3 colours, and I've got the 3 colours in the table, so when you write it as well, if we highlight in green, our knowledge, orange, our application, and pink or red, our evaluation. If we notice, this application, it's never that much. This needs to be significant. And where a lot of students go wrong is they just write 1 sentence. This is going to make them better because they're done. Evaluation needs to be in depth to get the 3 marks. We need to really explore and tell me why that makes them better. So for our point, the one that I've spoke about is muscular hypertrophy. But this is going to be the first paragraph. So although I have spoken about my muscular hypertrophy. I've just kind of introduced the question as well, because on the second two paragraphs you would just get straight into it. So I said for our point, as a result of long-term training, our body adapts to make us more efficient. So that was just our introduction to get us started. One adaptation the body experiences is muscular hypertrophy. This happens as a result of high impact training, which causes micro tears to the muscle fibres. When these fibres repair, they repair bigger and stronger, which is known as muscular hypertrophy. I've not linked that to netball yet. I've not shown anything else about facts. This isn't my opinion, I've not analysed it. It's just fact. So that's my AO1. On some of them, you might not have so much detail on the AO1 because there's not so much, but because it's muscular hypertrophy and it happens because of micro tears, I had a bit more to talk about. Then if we talk about AO2, so all I'm doing now is linking it to my netball player. So this will improve the performance of a netball player, as the netball player will be stronger. This means that she'll be able to jump higher, run faster and throw further. So I've not gone into loads of detail, I've not looked at the impact, I'm just saying what it's actually going to do just to look at. So if I look at that, a strong netball compared to a not very strong netball player, I'll see that the stronger one can throw further, those passes will be much stronger. I'll see when she goes for a rebound, she'll jump much higher. So this is more just on the surface, what's it done, what can you see that's changed? Now I'm going to evaluate the impact of this. Why is this going to make her a better player? How is it going to make her perform better? So this will have a large impact on her game and make her a better player. Throwing further and harder will mean that her passes are are more likely to be successful, and the chances of interception are reduced. So the other team are less likely to get it. This will support her team in keeping possession of the ball and therefore increases their chances of scoring and winning the game. Being able to run faster and jump higher will also improve her performance, as she'll be able to lose her opponent and get into space to receive the ball, as well as keep up with her opponent to intercept the ball. So because she's faster, she's able to lose that player so she can get into space. But also when the other team have got the ball, she's able to keep up so she doesn't let them get into space to win the ball. Therefore, just a concluding sentence to this paragraph, muscular hypertrophy will therefore largely improve the performance of a netball player. So I've gone into quite a lot of detail here from our evaluation, and considering this is just one paragraph, you've got 2 more to write on top of that for a 9-mark answer. So 9-mark answers are quite substantial, they're quite big answers and they need to be structured. We're going to do lots of these throughout the 2-year course, because the more that we do, you'll just get into the habit of AO1, AO2, AO3, and we'll do it in this order the whole time, and I'm not going to mark it unless we remember AO1, AO2, AO3. And the way you're going to remember that is also highlighting so we can see, and I'll keep referring back, you've missed your AO1. So a lot of the time this was the bit that people miss, because they just want to get straight into it and miss the really basic definition. So what we're going to try is we're going to try to write 1 paragraph each. So when we write that paragraph, we're going to do it into this structure. So we're going to do the PPE. So on your work, I want you to write down in your margin, and it doesn't matter which one you do, either AO1, AO2, and AO3, or you can just write PPE, whichever one that you'll remember. It might be better to do the AO1, AO2, AO3, because I'll refer to that quite a lot. So we're going to write that in the margin, and next to each bit I want you to have a go at writing your own. So you can choose any long-term adaptation, because it says on the body systems, it doesn't say it has to be cardiorespiratory this time. I'd say the bone density one would be pretty tough though. I'd go for one of the ones, think about what you can write the most about. So cardiac hypertrophy would probably be quite a nice one to write about. Maybe increase alveoli. So if you try and make them different, so I've talked about muscles. If you did one about the heart and one about the lungs, you're not going to feel like you're repeating yourself. So it would make it much easier. But we're only writing 1 for now anyway. So choose one that you feel most comfortable with. What are you going to be able to evaluate? And this evaluation, you'll maybe be able to use parts of this again. What would you like to write about, Simon?
I don't know, probably increasing blood cell production or
Increase red blood cells.
yeah.
Anyone know what they'd like to give it a go on? Do you want me to tell you one and we all do the same one first? Or would you like to choose your own? Is it easier to be told or easier to do your own?
They did the respiratory system with lung capacity.
Yeah, you can do that one. Okay, give it a go then. I'll let you just try it. So I'll give you 5 minutes. See if you can do one paragraph that uses this structure for a netball player. So this might be something that you might not have much knowledge in netball, but it's a team sport. They're going to run, they're going to jump, they're going to throw. You don't need to know the positions inside out. You just need to know what the body needs to enable the body to do that. So give it a go. So think about your point, what you're going to use. Give me the knowledge about the one that you're using. So if you're using cardiac output, what is cardiac output? Explain it. If you're doing cardiac hypertrophy, what is cardiac hypertrophy? Then link it to netball. What does that actually mean for netball player? And then how will that make them a better netball player? How will that improve their performance? And when you're talking about the improvements, remember we're looking at the impact and why. So ask yourself how will that impact and keep going on how that impacts until you feel like I have explored it and I'm not repeating myself. I'll stop talking now so we can give it a go. Don't worry if you can't go into so much detail to begin with, it's your first go at trying this. So if you've done it, try highlight. So green for A1, yellow for A2, pink for A3. So So we can see really clearly how much you've done for each one. So when you look at it, you should see you've got quite a big chunk of pink at the end. It's not a test, remember, so if you're stuck while you're doing it, or you're not sure if you're right or wrong, just saying I can.
Haven't
chosen
chosen one yet.
You haven't chosen one, right?
No.
Do cardiac output. Because you're just going to spend loads of time thinking about which one to do. So do cardiac output. Cardiac output's a nice easy one, there's lots to talk about. So first one, what is it? So that's your AO1. Just your knowledge of what cardiac output actually is. You might even state why it happens. So it would be linked to cardiac hypertrophy, wouldn't it? So this is a result of the heart being bigger and stronger. You could do that one. That'd be a good one. This one, all you're saying is what cardiac hypertrophy is. The long-term adaptation of exercise is cardiac hypertrophy. This is when the heart is bigger and stronger. Therefore, it can hold more blood and can pump more blood per day. Really good for the netball players. So why does that make them better? This means the netball player will have more oxygen at the muscles, therefore will be able to create more energy through aerobic respiration and break down the lactic acid during the game. And in your evaluation, you talk about what impact does that have. So why is that going to make them better? So if they create more energy, they'll be able to work harder for longer. They might be able to work longer than their opponent and get less tired, so they can, how hard they work at the beginning of the game, they can still do it at the end. Or you could talk about the fact that it will use to build up lactic acid, so their muscles won't get so tired. They'll still be strong at the end of the match. Let's do it in bullet point form. So write A1 down here first. And first, just state like one application of cardiac hypertrophy and define cardiac hypertrophy for me. Doesn't need to be a perfect definition, just state what it is. Try that first. So then what part are you on? Are you on AO1, AO2 or AO3?
AO1.
What are you doing that again?
Blood cell production.
Okay, so read your AO1 to me.
Our body without blood around training, therefore this makes us more effective in sports. Blood cell production is one adaptation that our body will experience. So that's what to do.
Good. You've not really told me what about that blood cells, so maybe just an extra sentence in AO1 saying that because of this we will have an increased number of red blood cells in the body, therefore we have more blood cells to carry oxygen. And then go on to your AO2, how will that help a netball player? Because red blood cells transport oxygen, don't they? Then you're on AO2 now. You spend so much time thinking. As soon as I told you what to do, you've got no issues. So cardiac hypertrophy is an increase in the size and strength of the heart.
I know, you should have done it, shouldn't you? Should have chosen to do it.
On Tuesday, could have.
So if we've got increased size and strength of the heart, what does that mean for the blood? What can we do per beat with that blood? Yeah, we can pump more carbon. So we say, so this is still for our knowledge. So we say this means that the heart can pump more blood around the body per beat and per minute. And that would be your knowledge, and then we can start moving on to a netball player. this is going to take you quite a long time to begin with, but the more we do them, it will just become natural and you'll be able to do it a lot quicker. So don't worry about time at the moment. We know all long-term adaptations are going to improve performance. Their main job is to make us more efficient. We might refer to efficiency in the evaluation. So why does that make them a better netball player? Why are they better than their opponent? How will it increase their chances of winning? Good, so we're starting to move on to evaluation now. I'll do a few more minutes and then we'll have a look at maybe sharing. So AF3, we need to make sure we explore enough about being repetitive, so we need to be concise, but give enough information that we are actually evaluating how that makes them a better player. Some of the things some people use to remember is point, apply, say why. So the evaluation is the say why. Do one more minute. You happy with your answer, maybe then? Does anyone feel comfortable sharing their answer? Oh, well done, Tibbs. Smiles at me, that's enough. Okay, when we share it, we're going to break it down to the AO1, AO2, AO3, so we all can just listen to it separately and process. So, Senan, what was your AO1?
Our body adapts over long-term training, therefore this makes us more effective in sports. Blood cell production is one adaptation that our body experiences. More blood cells will provide more energy and help provide build-up, help prevent the build-up of lactic acid.
Good, so that's all our knowledge. Well done. That was good. AO2, so now link that to my netball player for me.
This will aid my netball player's performance because the player will be fitter and have more energy.
Good, why?
Because there's more energy for the oxygen in the blood cells.
Good, I'd maybe just link that a tiny bit more. So because of the increased oxygen, it's not increased oxygen, but the increased oxygen carrying capacity. So they're better at carrying the oxygen because there's more blood cells. Therefore, they'll be able to create more oxygen through aerobic respiration. Okay, so it's going to increase her fitness as a netball player. This is where sometimes it would help if we have more knowledge. An easy thing that if I told you to begin with would have helped. A netball match lasts an hour. So you don't know it, you don't have to know it. We'll learn certain bits like that throughout, especially about the main sports that might come up. A netball match is an hour long, so it's 4 quarters of 15 minutes. And if you know that, all of a sudden you can add that bit of information. So a netball player needs to last an hour, so increased oxygen means they're able to keep up. But you're not wrong, what you've done is really good. Okay, and then your evaluation. So how does that increase oxygen make them a better player?
This will largely improve the netball player's game and will be able to help their team win as the netball player will be fitter than the other team's players and they'll be able to carry on making runs to get away from the marker nearer to the end of the game.
Good, perfect. So what they do at the beginning of the game is what they can still do at the end of the game with increased fitness. So they'll have a competitive advantage over their opponent because they can work at a high intensity throughout the whole match. Well done. Anyone else happy to share? No? You've done a different one, haven't we? So that's good. Okay, so AO1 first.
As a result of long-term training, our body becomes more efficient. One adaptation the body experiences is cardiac output.
Good.
This is a result of the heart being bigger and stronger. This means it can pump more blood and oxygen when needed.
Good. Done. So that's your knowledge. I'd maybe add just per minute because that's what cardiac output is, but I don't think you'd get marked down for that. I'm just being picky. Okay, so that's your AO1. Now let's do the AO2, so apply it to a netball player for me.
This will improve the performance of the netball player because the netball player will have more
Energy. This means they'll be able to have more energy to perform to their best effort.
Good, so it'd be the same as Senan, so we'd maybe want to talk about the fact that because it's an hour-long match, they need aerobic respiration. So we need that oxygen for aerobic respiration. I'm not expecting these to be perfect first time. This is when it's, with my students at school, it took 2 years to build on to get them 9 out of 9. And then evaluate that for me, Jemima.
I didn't finish this one, but
That's all right, just
this
tell me what
will
you
have
said.
a large impact on their game and make them a better player. They can't remember their handwriting. They will have more energy to throw the ball further and will have more impact, making it harder for the opposing team from the opposing team to obtain the ball. This will support their team in keeping possession of the ball and therefore increasing their chances of winning the game.
Well done. Right, let's try and do one together that we've not done and just bullet points, and not write it and not spend a long time doing it, but just a bullet point. So if I said our AO1, we're going to talk about increased, let's just do it quick, so increased alveoli. So what would we talk about for this point in our AO1? So increase alveoli. What knowledge would we need to give them in this part? So increased alveoli is knowledge, isn't it? So as a result of exercise, we've got increased alveoli in the lungs. Good. What happens to alveoli? What is the purpose of alveoli? What happens at the alveoli in the lungs?
Gas exchange.
Good, which means increased rates of gaseous exchange. Okay, that would be our main knowledge now. We've said that we've got increased alveoli in the lungs, which means we've got an increased rate of gaseous exchange because there's more places for gaseous exchange to take place. Now we're going to link it to the netball player. So the question says, how does it improve the performance of a netball player? What did I say about the length of a netball match?
Now,
It's an hour long. So it's an hour long match. Therefore, what type of respiration are we going to use? Long-term respiration. Aerobic or anaerobic? Aerobic respiration. And aerobic respiration needs
oxygen.
So it needs oxygen. So we said so far for AO1, we're going to talk about increased alveoli in the lungs, which means increased rate of gaseous exchange because there's more places for it to take place. Linking it to a netball match, we know a netball match is an hour long, which therefore it must use aerobic respiration, which needs oxygen. What else, because it does an hour long, actually sorry, let's break it down. In netball, is aerobic respiration because it's an hour long. Will it use anaerobic respiration?
Yeah.
In why?
Because it's over a long period of time and you need the endurance.
Good, so that's why you need aerobic. Anaerobic, remember, is the powerful one. So not the oxygen one that allows you to go for a long time.
Maybe if you're going to need it, if you want to do a shot or something.
So maybe a shot.
If you're trying to get from one side to the other really quickly.
Good, a sprint, so it also involves sprints. Shots in netball aren't so powerful, they're more relaxed. Maybe a long pass. What about a jump to get the rebound? There's also going to be a place in there that has anaerobic respiration. It's not going to be the whole time. So if we think about our netball match, we spoke about this with a football match last time. It's an hour long. I'm going to sprint, I'm going to jump. What's going to happen?
You're going to lactic acid will build up.
Good, so we're also going to build up some lactic acid because there is parts of anaerobic respiration. So why else do we need oxygen that we're getting from there for a netball player?
Lactic acid to get rid of it so you can keep performing.
Good, so here we might also state that a netball match has anaerobic aspects, e.g. sprints, therefore it's got the build-up of lactic acid. So what we've done there is that we've shown that we've got knowledge of netball and we've got knowledge of the content and we've been able to link them together. We don't need to evaluate it in this bit, we're just stating that that's the case. So we know that a netball match is an hour long, so it uses aerobic respiration, therefore we'll need that increase of oxygen. But it also has anaerobic aspects, so we'll use anaerobic respiration, which causes lactic acid. Now we can evaluate how that oxygen, or increased amount of oxygen with increased alveoli, makes a difference. So what points do you think we could talk about for AO3? How's it going to make them a better player? So should we talk about aerobic first? So we've said it's got increased O2 for aerobic respiration. How does that make them a better player?
Well, they could have more energy. They might be able to breathe easier.
Might be able to what, sorry?
They could breathe easier, like volume.
Yes, they're not running out, are they? So they don't look like that player that really can't keep up and they're trying to get more oxygen in because their body isn't coping. So if we think about, I can't remember what your first point was, if we think about they can get more oxygen in, what do you think they'll look like in their first quarter? Remember, because it's broken up into quarters, so their last quarter. Should there be a massive difference in performance? No, they should be able to sustain the same amount of performance or energy throughout the game. they're not a really good player in the first quarter, but an absolutely awful player in the last quarter that's walking and can't keep up. So they can work hard for the whole hour match. So they can work hard for the whole hour match. We could improve how that sounds. That doesn't sound the most scientific point. So they can keep up with the pace of the game for the whole hour. They can keep the same high intensity performance at the beginning as the end of the match. What else with this O2? Actually, no, let's keep this point because we've not really evaluated that, have we? We've just stated a point. They can work hard for the whole hour match. How's that going to improve performance? What does that really enable us to do? What does that look like for the netball player?
Increases stamina.
So it increases their stamina, or they've got an increased stamina. But now think about the netball player specifically. I'm the netball with an increased aerobic endurance. I'm able to work harder for the whole match. Sennon's marking me. What can I now do if I'm fitter than Sennon?
Get away from him.
Good, so it increases my ability to lose my player throughout the whole match because I'm not too tired to run away from them. What about my ability to defend?
Well, yeah, because you might be quicker because you're less tired.
Yeah, perfect. It gives me something that we can refer to a lot, a competitive advantage over my opponent. Do you know what that means? A competitive advantage, you know what I'm referring to there. So I've got an advantage over you because I'm fitter than you, therefore I'm going to get to that ball before you. I'm going to stay with you, I'm going to jump higher than you. I've got that advantage over you because my fitness is stronger than yours. So if we've got a high aerobic endurance, meaning we'll be able to get more oxygen to the muscles, I'm going to have a competitive advantage. Throughout that whole match, I'm going to continue to lose my player and get into space to receive balls. I'm going to help my team keep possession of the ball. So I'm going to give more options. I'm going to increase my team's ability to score because I'm helping them throughout the game. Does that make sense? What about when we're talking about anaerobic? So we've got increased O2 for anaerobic, although we do not need it for anaerobic specifically. What does that mean? How can we evaluate that? So anaerobic respiration is respiration without oxygen, but it creates the build-up of lactic acid. If we've got increased oxygen available during the game, during periods of aerobic, which happens in between those anaerobic, what does that mean? How's that going to make me a better player? What's that oxygen going to do first? So we've said we've got increased, there's anaerobic aspects, for example sprints, that mean a build-up of lactic acid. We've got more oxygen to break that down. How's that going to make me a better player?
You're able to keep moving throughout the endurance.
Of the match.
Good, so we're going to link it back into this. So it's going to help me keep moving because we're going to prevent the build-up. The build-up of lactic acid means we've got muscle fatigue, doesn't it?
Less likely to get cramp or something.
Good, so it'll mean less likely to get cramp, so decreased chance of cramp. We've got decreased muscle fatigue. What do you think that means for the power that we can create out of muscles? If we decrease the fatigue in our muscles, does that mean we can create more or less power? Yeah, our muscle can have more power, so towards the end of the match we can still jump, we can still sprint, because we've got less muscle fatigue. So when we're starting to plan answers, sometimes it's quite helpful to kind of bullet point it, because then you can go ahead and write it and make sure you're covering all your points. So on this question, we could have done lots of different things. When we looked at our different points, if I can get back to it, we've got lots of options here for our paragraphs. There's about 20 paragraphs almost that you could have written. You only need to write 3. Sorry, let's get back to it. Before I go to the next question, just because then I can just turn this video off, on your homework today, I'm not going to give you any set homework because it's your assessment. So I've given you an assessment, and just to show you this assessment, because we haven't covered all of the content, there's certain bits that I've put a red line through that you won't need to do. I can find it. So our assessment is here. So I want you to do an hour in this assessment. It's going to be an actual assessment, so I want to mark it so I can see your understanding. You can choose any part of Christmas to do this. So you can do it, revise for a good 2 weeks first, and then do it. You can think, I'm actually just want to do it and straight away and assess what I do. It's up to you.
Presents on Christmas Day.
Not on Christmas Day. But the bits where there's red for me, the bits that you do not do, you just skip that because that's content that we've not covered yet. So it's quite a, well, it's not too much at net, but there's a few questions that I've not asked you to do. So there's not many at all. Don't get confused by the front. It says an hour and 45 minutes, but that's for a full assessment, which should be 90 mark. We've got just under half of that. So I'm not looking at time limits yet. I'm just looking at content. So I've been quite generous on the time. As we get on the course, I'll start moving that time less. So that's just so I've gone through that with you, so you've got it. Okay. We're going to look at one more extension question. So this question, we're going to try do all 3 paragraphs, but not actually write them as such, more just bullet point what we think we could talk about. So this question is one that I think, no, it's not this question, we've done this one. This is one question that I think that we could maybe get confused on, and we'd look at the question and wouldn't know what to write. So let's have a look at it together. To evaluate the relevance of the different muscle fibre types for a 5,000 metre runner, how many paragraphs do you need to write for a 9-mark question? 3. How many muscle fibre types are there? So what do you think you're going to do? Yeah. A paragraph on each one. One muscle fibre is going to be really easy. Talking about a 5,000 metre runner, is that aerobic or anaerobic? Aerobic. So what muscle fibre is it going to predominantly use? Your cardiac, that's your heart. It's definitely going to use your heart. But think about, do you remember type 1, type 2A and type 2X?
Oh, the fast switch is slow twitch.
Yeah, so is it going to use more fast switch or slow twitch?
Slow twitch.
So it's definitely going to use more slow twitch. So the type 1 fibres is slow twitch. That's going to be quite easy to talk about. They're ones that produce a fair energy for fairly low intensity, although it's not necessarily low intensity at walking, but in terms of sport in general, it's a low intensity sport. It's going to provide enough energy for a low intensity sport. They don't tire easily, so they can give you endurance, which again you need for a 5,000 metre runner. So that's much easier, but then we also need to find aspects of the other 2 fibres as well, so they might just be for very short periods of time. They're not going to be many times where they sprint in. So what we need to do is we need to think about our point. We need to link it to why, not 500 metres, why that's going to link to a 5,000 metre runner. So again, for your type 1, you're going to find that quite easy. For your type 2, we're going to have to be really specific what point of the race that is actually going to affect, because there's not going to be, we can't talk about a sprint in general because it's not a sprint race. And then we need to evaluate the importance. So how will it help them do well? This is not a test. It's not something where we need to do without books. We can use our textbooks to do this, which I think is going to help. I want us to try and think about our points. Our point is going to be our knowledge. This will be type 1, type 2, type 2X. So all our points will be our knowledge of that fibre. What is that fibre? Our points is where in the race is that going to help them? And evaluation is how will it help them? How will it help them win that race? So what I want us to do now is we're going to bullet point. We're not going to write the whole answer. I don't want to spend an hour writing a 9-mark answer. But I want us to try and use that content in this 9-mark question. Got it? Okay, so let's find it in the textbooks.